Hello, and welcome to this week's invitation to write. It is always important to keep the basics of writing instruction in mind as you move through the week. Encourage daily time to write and set expectations, such as what the writing space should look like. Help students understand that writing is a recursive process that involves planning, drafting, receiving feedback, revising, and publishing or sharing. Finally, use mentor texts and models so that students can visualize a finished product. Keep nurturing your community of writers by writing alongside your students. Day 1. This week, students will explore process writing. Before you show them the invitation to write, you might mention that process writing involves adding the steps necessary to complete a task. To illustrate, you could ask them to brainstorm the steps they would need to take to ride a bike. In the student's Lit Lab guidebook, they will receive this week's invitation to write and to move through the steps of the writing process. This week's invitation explains that in Jabari Tries, Jabari is determined to make his machine fly all the way across the backyard. Like any engineer or scientist, he knows he needs creativity to solve his problem. Encourage students to sketch their own flying machine and the features that would help it fly across the yard or field in the space below. Let's move on to the planning stage. Prior to initiating the planning activity, you might want to show the students a drawing with the parts of a plane labeled. Then, in the space provided in the Students Lit Lab guidebook, have them sketch a solution to this problem. This week, they will use plain white paper to plan. Read the additional planning ideas aloud to them: longer wings, larger wheels, a launch pad. Encourage students to use the parts of a plane that could help the plane fly farther. Model the process for them, share your drawing with them, and encourage the students to share their planning too. Next, students will move on to drafting. When it is time for the students to move from planning to drafting, have them use their composition notebooks. In their notebooks, they will write about how they solved the problem and created a plane that would fly farther. Explain that other young engineers can learn from them. When writing with them first, you could start the conversation with, "I want to make my plane fly farther, so I will add bigger wheels and longer wings. I also think a slingshot might help me to launch my plane. What are some ideas that you can give me to help me start writing?" Model using the writer's composition notebook to draft. You can show the students your draft and read it aloud. "I wanted my toy plane to fly farther, so first I added bigger wheels and longer wings. Then I made a slingshot out of a branch by adding a rubber band. Next, I hooked the rubber band to the rudder of the plane and pulled the plane back. When I let go, the plane sailed across my yard, and when it landed, it went even further because of the big wheels. It worked." You might want to point out the transition words used to help readers understand the order of the steps, such as first, then, and next. Day 3. When possible, make time for feedback. On day 3, students can gather feedback from you and their peers. Have the students turn to the feedback guide located on the last page of the Students Lit Lab guidebook. Using the sentence and question stems provided, or those that have worked well for you in the past, have students ask others to provide praise, questions, or suggestions. You can also prompt students to focus on specific aspects, such as their ideas, vocabulary, design, and/or effort. After students have received feedback or have looked over their writing themselves, give them time to polish their pieces. If using the praise, question, suggestion protocol, have students focus on one suggestion from their peers to improve their drafts as they revise. You can model this process too. For example, the students might encourage you to add how far the plane flew. Finally, on day 3, help students choose a section of their writing to share on day 4. Now consider the ways that students can share their writing with their peers. Students can choose to share all or part of their work, and of course, if students are not comfortable sharing, they are not required to do so. Use a designated space that signals the featured author and have peers respond with finger snapping, clapping, or emoji cards. Writing is a joyful act, so be sure to make time for reflection. This is an excellent way to build students' self efficacy and identity, both as a writer and as someone who might pursue a STEM career. Questions could include the following: as a writer, what did you do well this week? What might you try differently next week? Which part of your writing makes you most proud? What did you learn about engineers? Could you imagine yourself becoming an engineer one day? Don't forget to capture the students' work, words, and wonderment and add them to the Wakelet. And always, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me.